Hey, good afternoon. Happy Friday, everyone. This is another episode of the Elliot and Jason show. We had a really great time in our first episode, so we decided we'd do it again. Jason, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jason, and Elliot and I met in college, and we were just talking about issues of the day. And then one of us mentioned, hey, maybe we should do a YouTube video because other people might be interested in what we're talking about. So we're having a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you enjoy watching.
Great. So, Jason and I have been talking in recent weeks about certain societal issues that have been coming up as a result of like the pandemic, also with the current job market situation that's going on, the economy. And one thing we kind of were honed in on was the essence of loneliness. And this is something that is, it's become a topic of the day and continues to be a topic that is being raised. Um, you know, there's news articles that I've been reading the last couple of days that he's been talking about it being an epidemic. That it's an epidemic mental health issue. And so we thought we would chat about that today, our perspectives on it, as well as talking about, ways that loneliness can be overcome, suggestions or things that we were exploring to overcome that loneliness. So starting out, I think related to how this all pretty much has become more of a topic. I think it came out of the pandemic, with the social distancing that occurred during that time frame of trying to avoid, contagious or getting other people sick. But some of the bad effects of that was that because of social distancing, people were staying within themselves because of the quarantines that were going on. There wasn't a lot of human interaction, and especially for people that don't have a strong support network or they're living on their own, like myself. I'm a single person. I don't have, family members. So during the pandemic, for me, was a pretty lonely period that I was just basically had Zoom. I would have like Zoom calls, but I was basically on my own. So talking about the from the COVID period, Jason, what are your thoughts in terms of how that might have affected the loneliness that we're dealing with
Yeah,
today?
yeah, no, it's really an interesting topic, Elliot, and I've thought a lot about it. I think loneliness has always been around. I think the COVID pandemic and the quarantine shed a light on the problem. And what I think about the classic example, of loneliness is the 1973 Billy Joel song, "The Piano Man," where there's a line in there while he's in a bar on a Saturday night, how everybody at the bar is sharing a drink they call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. And I think all of us kind of can relate to the scene where whatever town you're in America, you walk into a bar and there's going to be a lot of people sitting at the bar, and they're not there to drink. They can drink at home. They're there to feel better because they're lonely. And so they just want to be around a lot of other people. And it doesn't have to be drinking, it can be people going to work in a coffee shop, it can be people going to a diner just because they know the people who work there. And then all of a sudden, the things that made you feel better during the pandemic, those were closed off to you, and you were forced to be at home all by yourself. And I think it really kind of exacerbated the loneliness problem that was already there.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree. And some of it, like I stated, I did some Zoom calls. There was things that I tried to do to stay connected with people, but it wasn't the same. Like even, I'm an endurance runner, and what I liked about my training, was doing group runs. And so during the pandemic, all group runs were canceled. And so that was a very difficult time for me because that was another social outlet that I couldn't go to. Like you were saying, having those social outlets that they were just basically closed off during a period of time. So it was really hard for someone like myself that all my social activities were being, taken away. I think as it has, you know, as the pandemic has become less of an issue, even though there's rising cases of COVID, we don't have the social distancing that we had a few years ago. Things have kind of gotten back to quote unquote normal. Um, but I think one of the things that is, like you're saying, exasperating the essence of loneliness relates to our current economy and relates to the job market. It's a really competitive market right now. A lot of people are feeling lost in the process. Um, I myself, being laid off a couple, 3 months ago, it's been difficult to, try to find jobs and, network with people. And there is that sense of I'm on my own, or, I moved to Montana a year ago, and the mentality of Montanans is, self-sufficiency and getting stuff done, independence, having our own independent rights. And a lot of that can be seen that, you're basically on your own. If you're in a bad situation, you're going to have to get out of it on your own. So that kind of mentality makes it even more difficult for me to reach out to people. But I was wondering, what are your thoughts, related to what's happened in the last maybe couple of years and what's currently happening now in the economy with all these layoffs, people kind of being siloed and, you know, trying to reach out, but are feeling a sense of loneliness. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I also thought about this, and it's something that's just so obvious to me that the recent economic downturn, combined with especially the layoffs, has really worsened the loneliness situation. And I think part of this is because people have often created their social network around their work, and sometimes people use the term work family, or fill in the blank name of the company family,
Hmm.
and that's kind of a very dangerous thing to do, because you're sort of, if you do that, you're setting yourself up for a big downfall
Hmm.
if you are to lose your job. It's normal. We spend so much time at work, whether we're working remote, whether we're working in the office, we're interacting with people sometimes for several years. And they really do become not just our work network, but in some ways our social network.
Hmm.
And at any time, a corporation that doesn't have a soul, it's not a human, it can just decide for financial reasons to let you and many other people go. And then
Hmm.
that whole network that the person has built around their work family
Hmm.
is just gone in one day. And I think that's devastating, combined with the fact that then all of a sudden they have these financial hardships where they can't go out with their other friends because maybe their credit cards are maxed, or they just are being prudent and realize that they just don't have money to spend to go to a whatever event.
Hmm.
And I think it all kind of hits at once, and it really really makes somebody feel isolated and lonely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I myself, I put everything into my work. I'm a very hard worker, and I go above and beyond. Like in my previous job, I was a member of the events committee, so I would help in planning events. I would facilitate like happy hours with people remotely. I was part of the planning for our, annual get together, and it just um, to be laid off and from one Zoom call to say you're no longer part of this company, and to at that point not have that social interaction really is hard. And so someone that like myself that likes to work, that I like making a contribution, it's been really hard. I've been trying to, the people that have reached out to me or I've reached out back to them has been few and far between. Like I had dozens of people that I would be able to socialize on a daily basis, even remotely through Zoom or Teams or whatever. And that went down to maybe two or three that I contact maybe every couple of weeks. So it definitely feels lonely in terms of, being in a situation where I'm not working, they're working, but I feel I do have lost some of that connection. Um, but I think there's ways in which we can overcome loneliness. So I would like to hear your thoughts in terms of what you've heard or what you have experienced or observed in terms of ways in which loneliness could be overcome.
Sure. And one personal example for me was when I went through my divorce. During the separation and the divorce, I found myself alone very often. And it was, very difficult emotionally, but somehow I got myself to shift my view of my situation from loneliness to solitude. And I think there's a difference between loneliness and being alone. And I use that time for self reflection. to really kind of take a look at myself. What decisions had I made in my life? How did I view the world that maybe kind of got me to the situation that I was in where I was in isolation? And I think a lot of people don't want to self reflect because it means they have to be honest with themselves and they
Mhm.
have to, really dig down deep and look at maybe, their own faults. So they're not constantly blaming external factors that they can't control.
Mhm.
And so I think we're all able to do that, whether it was the COVID pandemic, or whether we've lost our job and we're having to stay at home because we can't afford to go out. It's an opportunity to examine our own lives. And then with regard to relationships with other people, it's a way to also look at ourselves and say, hey, what can I do to be a better friend to other people? If I'm looking at the world as I can't trust anybody, nobody really cares about me, then I'm just feeling sorry for myself. But if I then, instead of doing that, look in the mirror and look within myself and say, how can I be a better friend to people? What is it about myself that maybe is pushing people away and not bringing people towards me? Then I think you're able to do a couple things. You're able to realize that maybe you've been in these transactional relationships where people are only communicating with you or hanging out with you because you have something to offer. Maybe you've been paying the bill every time you go to the bar or a restaurant, right? And people will continue to use you. Or maybe you don't have a whole lot of people in your social circle because you haven't been a really good friend to other people. So what can I do to start, being a better friend to others? And then also, what am I doing with my time that can be productive and be things that I enjoy, and maybe puts me in a situation where I can be around other people and maybe find one or two really good friends, whether it's a book club or joining a kickball team or whatever it might be. I think it starts with having an honest conversation with ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. Some of the things that I've done um, is that I've reached out to the network of job seekers that I've met on LinkedIn and contact them through direct messaging. And then also I host a weekly job seeker, event session basically as a means of everyone coming together, talking about their frustrations, but also sharing glimmer of hope or things that they've been doing that has making traction in their job search. So reaching out to them, and I do make the effort of continually trying to at least let my friends know that I'm here. I'm honest with them and saying I can't really do all the, paid social stuff you guys are doing. But and they're respectful of that. And so there's been times where they've suggested that we go to like a free movie showing, an outdoor free movie or some sort of free event that we can just socialize and stay connected with. So I think I agree with what you're saying. It's both an internal effort that we must make to look at ourselves, look at what we can do, but then also not being afraid to reach out to people, letting them know that we're struggling, and then finding ways to make those connections. And the more traditional ways is, people are going to therapy. They're, looking at prescribing medicine if they're dealing with too much anxiety or depression. Those are other ways too. Those are more traditional ways to kind of address your emotional reaction when you're feeling lonely. Um, but yeah, I think those are some really good points. But we're almost out of time, Jason. So I just wanted to thank you for this conversation. I'm hoping that this helps others out there to look at loneliness, figure out ways in which they can maybe overcome it. And then, in comments, let us know your thoughts. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.